talk something about women and church. The very title itself is provoking, and one wonders now why just women and church and not just church or people and church. And the purpose of speaking exclusively on this particular topic on women and church is primarily to underline some important aspects of the church, especially in relation to women. And we know theologically that the church is nothing but a community of disciples of Jesus. The church is a people of God, and yet within this framework of the church being people of God, how do we understand the place and the role of women in the church? Before speaking about this, I think what we need is to really understand the place and role of women in the church. We need to reface the image of the church. And when I say reface the image of the church, it cannot be denied that over the years and centuries, because of several political, historical factors, the church has taken on a very patriarchal image. And to reface the image is to restore the human face of the church. And to restore the human face of the church is nothing but to recover the feminine dimension of being church, which has been lost and which has been forgotten. The second aspect with regard to women and the church is to reconstruct the structure of the church. And here again, concerning the structure of the church, it is concerning deconstructing dividing boundaries. Because we know very well that boundaries divide and exclude. And what we need to do is to break down these boundaries and transcend boundaries that will include, or boundaries that will transcend the dividing aspects of being church. And thirdly, recover Christ's vision for the church. And Christ's vision for the church is none other than being a community of equal discipleship, or a church that is egalitarian and inclusive, that Pope Francis often speaks about. Now, within this framework of refacing the image of the church, reconstructing the structure of the church, and recovering Christ's vision for the church, I'd just like to highlight some of the factors that have damaged, as it were, or wounded, as it were, the face of the church. And we know very well the main factor is that of patriarchy. And patriarchy, as we know too, that it is a system of social structures and practices. And in this system, no matter in which part of the world, whether it's related to politics or to culture or to the society or to religion, it's the men dominating, controlling, even sometimes exploiting women. That's the understanding of patriarchy, which is a system, it's a structure. And because of several factors, this particular system has also widened to a kind of an overarching system of graded subjugation and oppression. And this graded subjugation, this patriarchal graded subjugation and oppression, it filters down to every area of life and at different levels. And in this particular system, we find that women are considered not only to be the other of men, but also subordinate to men. And in our context, in our pluralistic context, again, there are several factors that contribute towards this graded system of subjugation concerning women vis-a-vis men. The factor that we are very well we know very well is that of the very fact that you are born as a girl. Biologically, it is subjugating. So girl, the gender itself is subjugated. Then even the status of a wife in the Indian society, her marital status, again in the family is subordinate. The very fact that one is an Indian woman, again that is subordinating, because here it is the social caste system, culture that contributes towards this subordination. So the very fact that we're Indian, being Indian is always associated with the caste as well as with the culture. And then if I'm a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian, there again religion plays a role also in contributing towards this subordination or subjugation of women. And to add to all these, we also have the economic and political factors. So we find women in India, in the pluralistic context of India, is a victim of multi-subjugations because of all these factors, a very gender, the religion that she belongs to, the society or the culture. So, and it is in this context that women have really got to find her way through. Now coming to this graded subjugation, it affects family life, it affects the society, it affects the church. And because of which we know women have been silenced, veiled, hidden. Now there's always an understanding that times are changing and the society is changing, and we find that today women are coming out of themselves, but then of which percentage of women are we talking about, and which strata of women are we talking about? From the total population of India, we know that the higher percentage of women are still illiterate, and the higher percentage of women are still coming from the rural background, and these women are still hidden. If at all there are women who are coming out of themselves, who are empowered, it's a very small percentage, and these are primarily in the urban setup. Now, how do we face this particular situation of subjugation, and especially the system that is subjugating? I think what is necessary first and foremost is to deconstruct gender stereotypes excuse me, and biases. And these gender stereotypes and biases are usually the consequence of social, cultural and religious constructs. These are constructs created by society, by religion, by culture. Biases, prejudices, stereotypes. And we got to deconstruct these. Similarly, for instance, if you talk about deconstructing a social construct, a woman, for instance, is not supposed to be speaking openly on issues concerning, say, politics or even her own status. She's not supposed to be making a choice about her future. Now, who determines this? Is it herself? Or is it the society? Or is it the constructs created by culture, by religion? And why is it only for women? Why is it not for every human being or for every Indian? So this is what is necessary in the first area, I would say, to deconstruct gender stereotypes. Secondly, to create gender sensitivity. Now this has been spoken amply about. Many feminists have even written about it. But basically, when you talk about gender sensitivity, what does it imply? In my opinion, it means, first and foremost, I feel what we need is a change of mindset. A kind of metanoia, not just merely a change, a total change, a metanoia of mindset. It first begins there. A mindset towards women, for example, even towards her body, towards her psychological and emotional makeup. a change of mindset towards her status as a woman, towards her identity as a woman. Because this has got a lot to do with our attitudes. If our mindset is one-sided, if our mindset is stereotyped concerning women, especially her body, her psychological makeup, or her status, her identity, or her dignity, then definitely it also affects our attitude towards women. And attitude can be, if it is colored by this kind of a mindset, attitude also can become negative. Attitude also determines relationships. If our mindset is warped, if our mindset is not open, which affects our attitude, then our relationships also, it also affects our relationship with the women. And if there is a kind of a change in the mindset, attitude and relationship, then we will notice that there is more respectful relationship towards the women. There is more openness in accepting her dignity, that woman is created in the God's image and likeness. There's also a respectful acceptance of women's identity. And when I talk about this gender sensitivity, especially with the change of mindset, this is applicable even for women. Because women too, because of the social constructs and cultural religious constructs, have adopted this kind of a closed-in mindset, attitude and relationship towards themselves. And that's why we need to create this gender sensitivity both among men and women. And the third aspect is to construct an alternate mode of authority. I'd like to speak on this particularly on authority because again, culture, the society and religion have also determined how authority has to be exercised in the family, in the society, in the religion, in the church. Authority actually, if it is viewed as something that is life-giving, authority that is reciprocal, dialogical, it connotes meaning. But authority, if it is kind of an up-down or ladder style of functioning, then this creates a kind of a division in the functioning of the church. And if authority is understood in this sense of authoritarian or an up-down ladder type of functioning, it has also affected the whole structure of the church, the place of the women in the church, because women have always been viewed as being in the lowest rung of this hierarchical ladder. And here I would say women have got something to contribute towards understanding of authority, especially when we look at the imagery of motherhood. Pope Francis speaks a lot about this, about men and women being fathers and mothers, and retrieving the understood of fatherhood and motherhood, especially in our exercise of being who we are as men and women, even as religious men and women, as consecrated people. And authority understood from the maternal point of view, from that perspective, it is more life-giving, it is more relational, just like a mother with that of a child. And this aspect is essential both for men and women. If you truly want to understand the place of women in the church, her role in the church, and if we want a church of equal discipleship. And from this point of view, concerning the deconstructing genders and stereotypes, creating gender sensitivity and an alternative mode of authority, what we need today is we have to move towards a church of partnership in a participatory church. And I think the best example of this partnership is God Himself. God Himself entered into a partnership with us when He gave us a double mission command of increase and multiply life and have dominion over or take care of life. He invites us to be co-creators with Him. He enters into a partnership with humankind. In the same way too, in the church too, Jesus himself is another example for us, who has invited both men and women to be in partnership with him to continue his kingdom mission. And why not the church? If we have to continue Jesus' kingdom mission to fulfill God's plan of salvation and his creative plan, we need to enter into this kind of a partnership. And this would entail kind of a communion model of being church, which has been given to us at Vatican II, which implies involving women in the ministry of the proclamation of the good news. Now this, I'm not talking about, preaching the good news from the pulpit, and why not? But here it is in the context of proclaiming the good news. And women have the aptitude to do it. In fact, Ecclesia Nazia even speaks of it, that women have a special aptitude in passing on the faith. And here I don't mean merely catechizing little children, merely teaching them catechism, but proclaiming the good news. And this women can do from the women's perspective. And this will be contributing another perspective in interpreting and understanding the scriptures, which would balance the masculine or the male perspective. We need both. And somehow the feminine dimension of understanding the good news and proclaiming the good news is missing. In this context too, I would also like to speak about the need for including women's experience of God. Why? Because women's experience of God is distinct and different from that of men. Both are important, both are significant, but unfortunately, women's experience of God is not articulated, is not expressed, and not even written. And this is another missing link in our heritage, in our Christian heritage, in the church. Even women's expression of her experience of God, women's expression of faith is distinct, is unique. And this is another aspect that we need to take stock of, because a woman's understanding, a woman's expression of her experience of God, a woman's interpretation of the Word of God will express the feminine ethos. And this would again balance the whole understanding of the Word of God. It will also give a more holistic understanding to being church. In the same context, we also require the feminine dimension in spirituality, theology, and liturgy. The next point is recognizing women's leadership, her competence, her intelligence, her creativity, her potentiality. And here I would say to include women as co-workers, as co-leaders in the life of the church, in the mission of the church, and not as sub-workers. Paul has done it in his time, and Paul refers to them as the women as his co-leaders, as his co-workers, which somehow is not happening today in our church. And if women are looked at as co-workers, as co-leaders, it somehow will bring back the biblical understanding of being church, the communal way of being church. And this would be a more credible way of witnessing, a credible way of being church, especially in our context today in the world, in our contemporary world. We speak so much about globalization, a world that is moving to becoming a world of where it crosses cultures, crosses civilizations, and even crossing gender barriers and other boundaries. And why is this not happening in the church? The church is part of society. The church is part of the whole global system. To bring about this, perhaps what we need is to also include women formators, spiritual directors, counselors, consultants with men in the houses of formation. I wonder how many houses of formation or seminaries have women spiritual directors or women counselors or women formators as part of the team. This again would give the feminine dimension to formation, to priestly formation, even to human formation. And related to this also would be to train women for canonical and judiciary undertakings, especially with regard to marriage and family, to counseling, lay leadership, especially in the context of marriage and family counseling. I think women with their intuition, with their motherly qualities, we would be able to render something constructive in marriage and family counseling. And this is what women have to be trained in. And for all this, I would also add is what we need is special programs to empower women, especially from the lower social and economic strata. Those who are marginalized, or those women who are in the periphery. Because these are the forgotten women, like the Dalit women, the tribal women, the rural women. These are women who have got to be empowered and reinstated so that their contribution can be made use of again in the life and in the mission of the church. And in this context again, I would say that if we want a woman of equal discipleship, if we want to retrieve the human face of the church, women can and should be playing an important role here. And this depends a lot on both men and women to recognize who women are and what women can contribute towards the church of today.